All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty provocative argument from Joseph Ng's workbook, The Gospel Reboot Camp. It's an idea that seriously questions how a lot of people share their faith, basically suggesting that the modern way of doing things might have it all backwards.
So it all boils down to this one question. Is the problem not what is being said, but the order it's being said in? The whole argument here is a challenge to that say everything all at once kind of approach.
And the author does not pull any punches. He uses this really jarring medical metaphor to get his point across. He's talking about fixing our discourse sphincters to stop evangelistic incontinence. His point is that the modern approach has kind of lost control, just letting all the information out without any sense of timing or proper sequence.
So what's the solution? Well, he calls it discourse sequencing. And the idea isn't about changing the message itself, not at all. It's about being incredibly intentional with the order. Some things, he argues, have to be said first, while other really important topics actually need to wait for the right moment.
Okay, so where does this whole idea even come from? Well, the author points us straight to the Bible, specifically the book of Acts. He highlights how the early apostles actually had two completely different opening pitches depending on who they were talking to.
On one hand, you had the Jewish audience. They already had all the backstory, right? They knew the scriptures, they knew about the prophecies, the idea of one creator God. They had the whole framework. But then you had the Gentiles, what the author calls regular folk, who were starting from absolute scratch, no biblical context whatsoever.
And it's the message for these regulars that really forms the heart of this whole argument. The author claims that if you actually look at the biblical pattern for talking to people with zero religious background, something really specific and frankly really surprising starts to emerge.
And what's wild is how consistent it is. When you look at three key moments in the Bible, the author finds the initial message always comes down to these 5 points. God is the creator. God is the sustainer of life. You need to turn away from worthless idols. There's a future judgment day coming, and God has appointed the judge. That's it. A very specific foundational pitch.
But this is where things take a really sharp turn. Because the author insists that what isn't said in these first conversations is maybe even more important than what is.
And here it is. This is the real bombshell of the argument. Just look at what's on this omitted list. The author claims that the initial pitch to regular folk leaves out almost everything we consider central to modern evangelism. Jesus' name, love, forgiveness, heaven, hell, salvation, sins, the crucifixion, even direct Bible quotes. It's a completely different way of starting the conversation.
So, the obvious question is, right, if you don't talk about all of that crucial stuff up front, when in the world does it get introduced? Well, according to the author, the answer can be found in a pretty unexpected place: the kitchen.
He calls it the spiritual Maillard reaction. Yeah, he's borrowing a term straight from cooking to describe this essential transformation that he says has to happen before you can move on to the next step.
Yup, you heard that right. Sweet and sour chicken. The author argues that if you understand how to make this one dish, you can understand the entire process he's trying to describe. Just think about it for a second. If you take all the ingredients for sweet and sour chicken, dunk them in a bowl, and nuke it in the microwave, you get a disgusting, soggy mess, a slurry. But if you follow the right procedure, if you deep fry that chicken first to get that crispy, delicious Maillard reaction, then add the sauce, you get a perfect dish. Same ingredients, totally different results. The takeaway? The sequence is everything.
Okay, so let's bring this back. That spiritual Maillard reaction is the author's metaphor for that moment of deep conviction, even fear, that happens after someone hears that initial message about a creator and a coming judgment. It's not something a person can force. It's that internal response that makes the listener ask that vital question: what do I have to do?
It's only after that reaction happens that the conversation can really begin. From there, the author lays out a very specific 4-stage roadmap for how the rest of the information is supposed to unfold.
So here's the full framework he proposes. You start with the kerygma. That's a fancy word for that initial announcement about the creator and judge. That's what's supposed to spark the Maillard reaction. Then, and only then, do you move to catechesis, which is just formal instruction. This is where all that stuff that was omitted finally comes into play, leading towards baptism. And from there, it's a lifetime of learning, moving from basic milk teachings to more advanced solid ones.
This slide really just nails the core difference in philosophy here.
The author is contrasting what he sees as the common approach, which is all about human persuasion, winning friends and influencing people, with what he calls divine conviction. One is about strategy and convincing someone. The other is just about faithfully delivering a set message in a very specific order.
And this quote from the source really frames that choice perfectly. It's asking, is the goal to be a good marketer, or is it to be an obedient messenger? It suggests that maybe you can't be both. So, to sum it all up, the main argument of the Gospel Reboot camp is this: evangelism isn't a sales pitch, it's a protocol. It's like a precise, divinely ordered recipe that has to be followed in order. The goal isn't to be persuasive, but to deliver that first part of the message and then trust that any reaction is the work of the divine, not the speaker. And that leaves us with a really fascinating thought that goes way beyond this one topic. Think about it in any kind of communication: teaching a class, giving a presentation at work, anything. How much does the sequence, the order in which you give information, fundamentally change the message itself? That's a powerful question to chew on.